Good morning, Detective O'Driscoll. Can you please introduce yourself to the court and explain your relation to this case?
My name is Detective O'Driscoll. I've been with the Summit County Sheriff's Office for 7 years. I'm assigned to the Investigations Division. I was assigned to be the lead detective in this case in April of this year. This case is an active case and the investigation is ongoing.
Detective, what was the Sheriff's Office first involvement in this case?
On March 4th, 2022, at 3:22 hours, Summit County Dispatch received a 911 call regarding an unresponsive male in the Francis area.
Have you listened to that 911 call?
Yes.
Who placed that call?
The defendant, Kouri Richins.
In addition to saying that someone was unresponsive, did Ms. Richins, the defendant, identify who was unresponsive and anything else about that person's condition?
Yes, she stated that it was her husband, Eric Richins, that was unresponsive, that he was cold to the touch and not breathing.
Did EMS and police respond to that address?
Yes.
Is that the family home?
Yes.
Was a portion of the police and EMS response captured on police body camera video?
Yes, it was.
Have you reviewed that video?
Yes, I have.
On that video, what time does EMS pronounce Eric Richins dead?
03:58 hours on March 4th.
What, if anything else, does EMS say about how long he had been dead?
One of the EMS personnel made the comment that he had been dead a while.
Did the state medical examiner's office conduct an autopsy of Mr. Richins?
Yes, they did.
What did the medical examiner identify as the cause of death?
Drug intoxication with the specific drug being fentanyl.
I'm going to now ask you, Detective, some questions about someone with the initial CL. Do you know who I'm talking about when I say CL?
Yes, I do.
Who is CL in relation to the defendant?
CL is an associate of the defendant. She cleaned houses for the defendant's business as well as her personal home at times.
Does CL have a criminal drug history?
Yes.
Is she under supervision in a different county, a county other than Summit County?
Yes, she is.
And is that in relation to certain drug charges?
Yes.
Does the court program in which she's in monitor treatment and testing, etc.?
Yes.
Do you know how CL is performing in that program?
Based on my interactions with CL, she is progressing through the stages of that program and that her personal outlook on her recovery is optimistic.
Have you interviewed CL in connection with this case?
Yes.
Approximately how much time have you spent interviewing her?
Over the course of multiple interviews, several hours each, I would say upwards of 10 hours.
Was CL in custody when you interviewed her?
Yes, she was.
Was that interview captured on video and audio recording?
Yes.
What, if any, promises did you make to CL regarding her cooperation with being interviewed?
CL was not made any specific promises, but at the outset of our interviews, we explained to her that her cooperation in our investigation would result in us working with the prosecutors that were responsible for the charges she was facing.
Did you express to CL the seriousness of this case as well as the charges she was facing?
Yes, we expressed to her the seriousness of the charges and the possible results of those charges. As well, we impressed upon her the importance or the value of her testimony in this case as it related to the charges that she was facing, and that her testimony or any information that she may have was more important to us.
Did you stress to CL that the information you were asking her about needed to be credible and verifiable? Yes,
we told her at the beginning of our interview that any information that she may have, we would need to corroborate in order for it to be of value to us.
Did CL cooperate with being interviewed?
Yes, she did.
Did CL know Eric Richins?
Yes, CL told us that during the time that she spent cleaning the Richins home, she got to know Eric, that she felt that he was a really good person, she liked him, and she was very saddened to hear that he had passed away.
Did there come a time when investigators executed a search warrant on CL's home?
Yes.
In executing that warrant, did you make any observations consistent with CL's testimony that she felt bad about Eric Richins' death?
Yes. Inside the home, we identified a bedroom that belonged to CL. In the bedroom, there was a mirror above a desk. On the mirror were taped or affixed several inspirational quotes that seemed to relate to her recovery and her drug court program. Amongst all those inspirational quotes was a newspaper clipping of Eric Richins' obituary.
Did you get the impression that part of the reason CL cooperated is because she felt bad for Eric Richins?
Yes, in fact, she said so many times in our interviews.
Detective, I want to turn now to what, if anything, CL told you about the defendant requesting that CL purchase fentanyl for the defendant. What did CL tell you?
In our interviews, CL told us that in early 2022, the defendant reached out to her either by phone call or text message requesting that she procure fentanyl for what the defendant reported was a investor who had a back injury.
And upon the defendant asking CL to get fentanyl, what did CL do?
CL told us that she reached out to an acquaintance of hers, acquaintance one, and requested that she introduce her to somebody that could sell her fentanyl.
Did acquaintance one introduce CL to someone that could sell CL fentanyl?
Yes, CL said that acquaintance one provided her with a phone number of another acquaintance two, who was someone that she knew could sell CL fentanyl.
And did CL say that she ultimately contacted acquaintance two?
Yes, she did.
What, if anything, did CL say about purchasing fentanyl from acquaintance two?
CL told us that she contacted acquaintance two after receiving his phone number and asked to arrange to meet to purchase some fentanyl from him. She stated that sometime in February, she believed she met up with acquaintance two at a Maverick gas station in Draper and purchased from him 15 to 30 round green-blue pills, which she understood to be fentanyl.
Using phone records through the course of your interview with CL, were you ultimately able to narrow down on what that date was in February that CL purchased fentanyl from acquaintance two at the Maverick in Draper?
Yes, based on forensic evidence, we were able to determine that that date was February 11th, 2022.
What, if anything, did CL say about what she did with the fentanyl pills that she purchased from acquaintance two?
CL told us that after purchasing the pills from acquaintance two, she returned home to her house in Heber. She said that either later that night or the next day, the defendant met her in the driveway of that home and did a hand-to-hand exchange of pills for cash.
I'm going to turn now, Detective, to some questions regarding witnesses who corroborate CL's testimony, okay?
Okay.
You mentioned acquaintance number one. Have investigators interviewed acquaintance one?
Yes.
Have you reviewed body camera, audio, and video of that interview?
Yes.
Does acquaintance one corroborate CL's testimony?
Yes. She stated that CL contacted her in early 2022 and asked for someone that could sell her fentanyl. In the body cam, she also retrieves her cell phone and shows investigators the messages that corroborated that.
And what kind of messages were they?
They were messages between acquaintance one and CL on Facebook Messenger app.
And have you reviewed those messages?
Yes.
Is the first of those messages dated February 6, 2022 at 1:37 p.m.?
Yes.
Does it read, text me, I've got a question, won't do it on this?
Yes.
And that's CL writing acquaintance one, asking acquaintance one to text CL because she didn't want to write over Facebook Messenger?
Correct.
Did acquaintance one say whether or not she ever, in response, contacted CL?
Yes. She said that she then either texted or called her subsequent to her request.
You testified that acquaintance two sold fentanyl pills to CL at the Maverick in Draper. Have investigators interviewed acquaintance two?
Yes.
Have you reviewed body camera, audio, and video of that interview?
Yes, I have.
Is acquaintance two able to corroborate CL's testimony?
Yes, acquaintance two was able to recall that he sold fentanyl pills to a friend of acquaintance one's in early 2022, a Maverick gas station in Draper.
I'm going to turn now, Detective, to some forensic data questions and whether forensic data corroborates CL's narrative, okay?
Okay.
Have you reviewed carrier records of the defendant's phone?
Yes.
And I want to just clarify one thing. I'm talking right now about carrier records different than cell data records. We'll have an expert testify about cell data records in a moment. I'm just going to ask you about the carrier records, okay?
Okay.
What, if anything, do the carrier records for the defendant's phone, or what, if anything, in the carrier records for defendant's phone corroborate CL's testimony?
The cell records from the defendant's phone show several phone calls back and forth between her and CL in early 2022.
Do they show any text messages back and forth between the defendant and CL?
Yes, several.
Have you reviewed those text messages?
We were only able to see the timestamps and who the sender and receiver was. We're not able to see the content of those messages because they appear to be deleted from both the defendant's phone and CL's phone.
Have you reviewed the call history and carrier records of CL's phone?
Yes.
Does CL's carrier records and call history corroborate CL's testimony?
Yes.
Is there a particular set of calls on February 11th, 2022 between 5:19 p.m. and 6:52 p.m. in CL's phone history?
Yes.
Did you question CL regarding those calls?
Yes. She said those calls were to acquaintance two and that they were to arrange the specific date and time to pick up fentanyl in Draper.
Turning now from CL's purchasing fentanyl for the defendant to the defendant's purported timeline on the night of Eric Richins' death, okay?
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that police interactions with the defendant were captured on video. Have you reviewed that video?
Yes, I have.
Did the defendant provide police with a written statement in the early morning of March 4th, 2022?
Yes, she did.
Have you reviewed that statement?
Yes.
What on the early morning of Eric Richins' death did the defendant report had happened that evening?
She stated that the last time that she saw Eric alive was between 9:30 and 9:45 p.m. She stated that before going to bed, they had had a drink together to celebrate a closing on a house for her business. She said that they got in bed between 9:30 and 9:45, and shortly after getting into bed, one of the children had a nightmare, and that the defendant got out of bed and went to be with that child in their bedroom and slept in that bedroom until 3 a.m. or around 3 a.m. when she woke. She stated she returned to her own bedroom, got into bed, and felt that Eric was cold to the touch. She stated that she turned the light on, saw that he wasn't breathing and that he didn't look normal, and that she then called 911.
Did the defendant say whether anyone else was in their home other than the defendant, her husband Eric Richins, and their 3 young children?
No, she stated no one else was in the home.
Turning now to the defendant's statements regarding whether she performed CPR on her husband, okay?
Okay.
Did the defendant tell investigators when they arrived at her home shortly after she called 911 whether or not she performed CPR on Eric Richins?
Yes, she reported that she did.
I'm going to refer to someone now as defendant's best friend. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
What, if anything, did the defendant tell her best friend regarding whether she performed CPR on Eric Richins?
Investigators found text messages between the defendant and her best friend. That was her explanation to her friend that she conducted CPR on Eric prior to his arrival.
And do those text messages read, "I pumped so damn hard, so hard, screaming at him to come back to life"?
Yes.
You testified earlier, Detective, that EMS responded. Have you interviewed the first EMS responder?
Yes, I have.
What observations did that EMS responder make?
They told me that when they arrived, they began CPR compressions on Eric, and that upon beginning those compressions, Eric began to foam at the mouth. He stated that observation indicated that CPR was not likely conducted before he arrived.
Detective, as part of your investigation, did you look into whether Eric Richins used illicit drugs?
Yes.
What did you determine?
Based on the interviews that we conducted with those who knew Eric well, all stated that he did not use illicit drugs other than consuming THC gummies on occasion.
Do those that you spoke to include Eric's 2 best friends that he's known since high school?
Yes, both made the same statement that they never knew Eric to use any illicit substances other than the THC gummies.
When I reference a hunting guide in Mexico by the initials TR, do you know who I'm referring to?
Yes.
Did you speak to this hunting guide?
Other Summit County detectives did, yes.
And what did this hunting guide, if anything, say about Eric Richins using illicit drugs while hunting in Mexico?
The guide told detectives that several of their clients, when they come to Mexico, will seek out someone that can put them in contact with illicit substances while they are down there for their hunt. He stated that Eric Richins was not one of these, that Eric was solely focused on the hunt.
Has the defendant made any statements regarding whether her husband, Eric Richins, used illicit drugs other than THC?
Yes, in several statements made by the defendant throughout the investigation, there have been at least 10 times that she has said that Eric does not use illicit substances and did not use illicit substances.
And just to be clear, other than THC?
Other than the THC gummies, correct.
On the night Eric Richins died, did investigators search the Richins home?
Yes.
Did they find any illicit drugs?
No.
Did they find any paraphernalia or packaging or other evidence of illicit drugs?
No.
Did they find fentanyl anywhere in the home?
Only that which was in Eric's body.
We're going to now shift a detective from the night of Eric's death to a second drug buy initiated before his death and concluded after his death, okay?
Okay.
What, if anything, did CL tell you about the defendant approaching CL a second time for fentanyl?
CL told us that approximately a week after delivering the first load of fentanyl, the defendant reached out to her again by text or call and said that she wanted some more fentanyl that was stronger than the previous batch.
And in response, what, if anything, did CL do?
CL told us that she again reached out to Acquaintance 1 because she had lost the phone number for Acquaintance 2 and again requested from Acquaintance 1 that she provide her with the phone number for Acquaintance 2. She also made other statements in Facebook messages regarding that request.
In your interview, or detective's interview rather, with Acquaintance 1, did she corroborate that indeed CL reached back out to her asking for Acquaintance 2's phone number?
Yes, in the same Facebook Messenger, it showed the two different contacts on the two different dates.
And does the second Facebook message, was it dated February 25th, 2022 at 9:40 p.m.?
Yes.
And does it read, I need those again, but more, and I don't got a ride, I lost your friend's number?
Correct.
Did CL and Acquaintance 1 both say that Acquaintance 1 provided CL with Acquaintance 2's phone number again?
Yes.
What then, if anything, did CL do with Acquaintance 2's phone number the second time?
CL told us that she again contacted Acquaintance 2 and arranged again to meet up at the same Maverick gas station in Draper to purchase again 15 to 30, this time blue round pills that she understood to be fentanyl.
On the way to the Draper and Maverick, the second time, when she purchased 15 to 30?
Yes, 15 to 30 pills.
Which she believed to be fentanyl. Did she make any stops along the way?
Yes, CL told us that the second time that she procured fentanyl for the defendant, she did not have a vehicle to drive on that date. She said that she reached out to a friend, Acquaintance 3, and asked that he give her a ride to go purchase fentanyl. She said that he did pick her up, that they traveled from Heber City to the defendant's home in Francis, where, according to CL, the defendant had told her there was a check waiting under the mat at the defendant's home. She said that she checked under the mat and didn't find a check, and so she knocked on the defendant's door, and the defendant came to the door and wrote her a check from her business, from the defendant's business, for $1,300 for the purchase of the fentanyl. CL told us that afterwards they drove to the America First Credit Union in Heber City, where CL banks, and cashed the check and deposited $300 of it into her account at America First Credit Union. She said that after stopping at the bank and getting the cash, they then drove to the Maverick gas station in Draper and purchased the pills from Acquaintance 2.
Did investigators execute a warrant at the America First Credit Union in Heber?
Yes, and that warrant returned a copy of the check written from the defendant's business account in the name of CL, and a receipt that shows that it was cashed and that $300 were deposited into CL's account.
And then CL ultimately, being driven by Acquaintance 3, went to the Maverick in Draper and purchased fentanyl a second time from Acquaintance 2.
Correct.
What, if anything, does Acquaintance 2 say that corroborates CL's testimony?
Acquaintance 2 in his interview stated that he remembered selling fentanyl to a friend of Acquaintance 1's on two separate occasions at the same Maverick gas station in Draper. He also said that he remembered the second time that he sold her the pills that CL was with another person who matched the age and gender of Acquaintance 3.
Have you interviewed Acquaintance 3?
Yes.
What, if anything, does Acquaintance 3 say to corroborate CL's testimony?
Acquaintance 3 corroborated all the same details that CL told us about that day. and in fact showed us text messages on his phone that also corroborated that story.
Detective, I'm going to ask you now some questions about what are commonly known as bug-out bags, okay?
Okay.
Did investigators execute several search warrants on the defendant's home or the family home?
Yes.
Did those warrants identify what are commonly known as bug-out bags?
Yes. There were several duffel bags stored in the garage along with backpack-sized day packs, and each was identical and labeled for a different member of the Richins family. Those backpacks were seized subject to a warrant and were inventoried and photographed. Inside the bags, detectives located several items that would be useful in an emergency situation, but the most interesting were documents needed for travel for each member of the family. Each bag contained a photocopy of a state-issued ID in the children's case, along with passports for Eric and the defendant, as well as global entry travel cards for both Eric and the defendant.
Did those bags also contain clothing, toiletries, that kind of thing?
Yes.
Did detectives know when those bags were packed?
No.
And there was a bag for Eric as well, is that right?
Correct.
I have no further questions for you. Ms. Lazaro might. Thank you.
Detective, it's O'Driscoll, right?
Correct.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to follow a little bit the same timeline just so we kind of keep things together. You said you reviewed the body cam that was provided on the night that Eric passed away, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And Kouri made a statement that night to police, a written statement.
Correct.
And she told them that she had made a drink, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so they were aware of that. Was there anything in that body cam or investigation that talks about them looking for a glass that a drink had been made in?
No.
Okay. But you said that they searched for illicit drugs, correct?
I don't know if they searched for illicit drugs, but they searched the home.
Okay. So they searched the home that night knowing that he had a drink right before he went to bed and made no note that they had recovered glasses, looked for glasses, anything along those lines, correct?
Not to my understanding.
Okay. You also testified that when you interviewed CL, she was working on both a personal and a professional capacity for Kouri, correct?
Correct.
And she was cleaning houses, that she was both cleaning Kouri's personal home and then she would clean homes that were investment properties, correct?
CL told us that she cleaned both homes for Miss Richins' business as well as at another time frame she cleaned their personal home.
Okay.
So not necessarily at the same time.
But at the time, she was cleaning homes for the business, correct?
Which time are you referring to?
On or about the time leading up to or during your investigation, end of the year, end of 2021, beginning of 2022.
At that time, from my understanding, what CL told us, she was cleaning only investment properties belonging to the Richins Realty Company.
And she was getting compensated for that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so the check that you issued the search warrant on for the bank, that was written from Kouri's business account, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it could very well be that Kouri was paying her for cleaning houses, correct?
I don't want to speculate, but
It could be,
It's
despite
possible.
what CL said, correct? Okay. You also testified that CL was progressing through her drug court program and you were optimistic about how she would do in it, correct?
no, I testified that she was optimistic about her own personal
Sorry
recovery.
if I misstate that. How long were you investigating CL? When did you begin investigating CL?
I don't know an exact date, but the beginning of 2023.
Okay. And were you monitoring what she was doing at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Because you knew she had a boyfriend or this guy in Vegas, some other details about her life, correct?
Initially, at the outset of investigating CL, no, we didn't know all those details.
But over the course of your investigation, you learned them.
Correct.
Did you have CL's phone, correct?
Summit County Sheriff's Office evidence text do.
But you've reviewed it.
Yes.
Okay. And you testified about text messages between CL and the defendant on or about this time period you're looking at in February, correct?
Correct.
Did you review any other information prior to that time about contact that CL and the defendant had had?
I'm unsure,
Did you even
but
look?
it's possible that we looked into communications. In this investigation, initial stages, we looked into communications with everybody that the defendant had been communicating with.
Okay. But you don't don't recall, or you didn't look for a pattern of communication between CL and the defendant, is that correct? You were focused on February?
I guess that depends on what stages of the investigation you're talking about.
I'm talking about any of them. Did you ever look and see if CL and the defendant texted each other about anything on a regular basis?
Yes.
Okay. And how far back did those go?
I'm not sure on exact dates again, but into 2021.
Okay. So for a period of time, because CL is working for the defendant, there's communication, correct?
Correct.
And nowhere in the communication between CL and defendant are there any text messages asking for drugs, correct?
We didn't find any, but there were also gaps in time frames in the phones when we looked at them.
Now, I want to also talk about, you said you didn't make any promises to CL, is that correct?
Correct. No specific promises.
When was the first interview you had with CL?
I believe it was April 28th or 26th. I believe it was the 26th.
Did you have any contact with her prior to that?
No.
Did anybody from law enforcement have contact with her prior to that?
Not from our office.
You don't know if anyone else talked to her?
I don't.
Okay. Now, part of this came out of a raid or something along the lines that was coordinated with at least ATF and some other agencies, correct?
CL's home was subject to a search warrant based on information that we had gathered during our investigation into CL.
Okay. And that search warrant would essentially contradict that she was doing well and what she was supposed to be doing in drug court, correct? She was buying drugs, wasn't she?
We didn't know that. We knew that she was associating with people that we knew had active warrants for drug charges.
Okay. And that would be a violation of drug court conditions, correct?
From my understanding, yes, but I don't know the details of that.
Okay. And as part of that search warrant, were individuals arrested?
CL was arrested, yes.
There were other individuals who were arrested too, correct?
I'm not recalling other individuals that were arrested on the date that the warrant was served.
Okay. Were any drugs recovered at the home?
Yes.
Okay. And you also recovered a firearm from CL's bedroom, correct?
Correct.
And that would be a violation of her drug court conditions, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, in this first interview in April, you begin the interview, I'm over here to find the right note, by explaining to CL essentially how dire of a situation she's in, correct?
I don't have the interview memorized, but I know we talked about that, yes.
Okay, well, you told her that she was on probation to drug court for 4 first-degree felonies, correct?
Correct.
Okay, a violation of that is a potential prison sentence, correct?
It would depend on the prosecutor, but that's potentially true.
Okay, a first-degree felony carries a possible penalty of life in prison, correct?
I don't know. I would have to reference the code.
So you told her she was facing problems with that, correct? That
Correct.
This would be a violation. So she'd be on the hook for 4 first-degree felonies.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. And you also told her that having the firearm could potentially be a new crime, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then you also told her that the U.S. Attorney's Office was essentially on board with screening drug distribution charges, correct? I'm happy to play it if you don't remember.
I don't remember specifically.
Okay. Do you remember talking to her about potential federal charges?
Yes.
Okay. So she was aware that not only was she facing multiple first-degree felony prison sentences, she was also potentially facing federal charges, correct?
Correct.
And during that initial interview, she tells you that she didn't buy fentanyl, correct?
I don't know if she made that specific statement, but she talked about not knowing anything about fentanyl.
Okay. And that interview lasted about an hour and 19 minutes, hour and 20 minutes, correct?
Correct.
And that interview ends, with you telling her, several times you tell her to think through all of this and let you know if she wants to help, correct?
Yes, I gave her the opportunity to tell us up front whether she was willing to cooperate or if we should just not bother interviewing her anymore.
Okay. But this is after you essentially tell her that she has the potential of doing a considerable amount of state and federal prison time, potentially.
Yes, this is a common tactic in law enforcement to be able to leverage charges for information.
Okay. In fact, you did in this case leverage charges for information because you told her that you didn't care about first-degree felonies or federal charges. What you cared about was information about about Kouri getting drugs, correct?
I told her that I was interested in the information that she may know about this case.
Okay. But you told her also that Eric died of a fentanyl overdose, correct?
Correct.
And you told her that you thought that Kouri gave him the drugs, correct?
I did not specifically say that.
You alluded to the fact that you needed information about Kouri getting fentanyl because that's how Eric died, correct?
I don't know if I made that specific statement, but the information that we tried to convey to CL was that we wanted to know the information that she may have regarding Eric's death.
Okay. And you didn't care about any additional charges. All you cared about was that information, correct?
As I said previously, we expressed to her that the information that she may have was more valuable to us than seeking charges against her.
All right. And then you interview her 2 more times. Is that right?
No, there were, I believe, 3 more after our first one.
Okay. Were all of those audio and video recorded?
Yes.
Okay. And those were turned over to the state in this case, correct? The state being the prosecutor's office. Now, forgive me because with all these interviews, I'm not sure which one comes from which. You, in subsequent interviews, tell CL that she needs to give good enough details that will ensure that Kouri gets convicted of murder, correct?
I don't know if I made that specific statement, but I did express to her that the information that she gave us needed to be specific enough that we could corroborate it and that it could be presented to a courtroom.
Okay. And that she was, quote, screwed at this point for a minute or a few years if there's not cooperation, correct?
No, I never made such statement.
Okay. Did you ever tell her this was her get out of jail free card?
No, I did not.
Okay. Are you sure about that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at some point, CL tells you that, in one of the interviews, that Kouri contacted her between December and February to obtain prescription pills for an investor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And she doesn't specifically state fentanyl at that point, correct?
Are you referring to CL?
I'm referring to CL.
I don't remember, but I don't believe so.
And in fact, I'm guessing it's something where on the second or third interview, CL says that those first pills, well, never says those first pills are fentanyl, correct? It never says that Kouri asked for fentanyl, correct?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question?
Sorry. In those first, in the first transaction, so initially CL tells you that there were 3 transactions prior to Eric's death, correct?
Yes, and what I have to say here is that
That was a yes or no question.
But none of the information that we got from CL was perfectly chronological. We had to piece it together over multiple interviews to come to the conclusion that we came to.
Because you told her you needed something more specific to ensure that Kouri gets convicted, right?
No, we told her that we needed more details on what she was talking about and specific dates and times.
But in the first one, she says there's 3 transactions prior to Eric's death, correct?
At some point in our interviews, she told us there were 3 total transactions.
And she says that Kouri was only looking for prescription pills or hydrocodone pills, to be specific, correct?
CL referred to them as Roxys.
What do you know Roxy's to be?
They can be different things in the drug world. They can either be counterfeit pills that are meant to look like a prescription pill, or they can be actual prescription pills. But generally they're known to be opiate-based drugs, whether illicit or pharmaceutical.
Okay, so something along the lines of hydrocodone or Oxycontin or something along those lines, correct?
It could be, yes.
Okay. And she specifically says that she was looking for $900 worth of fentanyl pills, correct?
I don't know if initially, but she did make the statement of $900 at one point in one of our interviews.
Okay. And she says that Kouri told her to leave the pills at an outdoor fire pit at the Midway house where there was cash, correct?
I don't know if she made that exact statement, but yes, she told us that at some point in part of the exchange that she was instructed to leave pills in an outdoor fire pit in a house in Midway.
Okay. And in fact, you sat there with her in this interview and did house searches, correct? Trying to figure out which house this was.
Yes.
Okay. Because she couldn't really tell you which house it was, correct?
She couldn't give us an address, but she was confident that she could find it if she could drive there.
Okay. And did you take her for a drive there?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever do any follow-up investigation on whether or not that house ever sold?
Yes.
And you know that house sold sometime in January of 2022, correct?
From what I understand, yes.
So Ms. Richins no longer owned that home or occupied that home or had access to that home in February, correct?
I don't know.
Well, the house was owned by somebody else, right?
Again, I don't know.
Well, you said it closed in January of 2022.
From the information that I was told from other people, other investigators that had looked into that, I was told that Ms. Richins owned the house at some point and that it sold at some point. I don't know dates exactly.
Don't you think that date would be important if CL's telling you that she had access to the home and was there in February?
Possibly.
That might be a good fact to know. Okay. CL then does subsequent interviews, correct?
Yes, we had multiple interviews with her.
Okay. And after being told that she needs to be more specific, as your words are, correct? She now says that it was specifically fentanyl that Kouri asked for, correct?
Correct.
And that she didn't actually take the pills to that house in Midway. It was a hand-to-hand transaction, correct?
Like I said, she went back and forth on her memory on which instances referred to which transactions. And ultimately, she told us that she was sure that the first transaction of fentanyl was a hand-to-hand transaction in her driveway.
Okay. And was what's been referred to as acquaintance 3, was that in regard to that transaction?
No, it was the second transaction.
Were you ever to corroborate, was anyone with her that could corroborate that she saw CL hand Kouri drugs?
Not that I know of.
And then she states that now there was a third transaction that occurred after Eric's death, correct?
She didn't make the statement that it was after Eric's death, but she told us there were 3 total transactions.
So the information contained in the state's amended information, you don't know where that came from?
Which information are you referring
That
to?
she purchased drugs after Eric's death.
Yes, I do know where it came from.
Okay. And you're saying CL did not sell drugs to Kouri after Eric's death?
CL could not remember specific dates and did not make mention that the transaction happened after Eric's death. But when presented with digital evidence from other witnesses, she confirmed that that was most likely correct.
Okay. So she just agreed with your scenario of events, correct?
No, in fact, several times during our interview, she told us that as we presented her more information, it helped her remember more.
Okay. So as you're telling her to be more specific, you're providing her with information that you're gaining in the case, and she's saying, now I remember. Accurate?
Yes.
You also testified that you interviewed 2 of Eric's best friends, right?
Yes.
And during one of those interviews, actually I'm going to go back to CL for just a second. On this transaction that you allege that this check was used for, or the state alleges this check was used for, you testified that she picked up the check that was written on Kouri's business account and cashed it, right? And drove to the Maverick and purchased fentanyl.
She didn't drive, but she was
Someone drove her, okay?
Yes.
And the person with her corroborates that.
correct.
And that third witness never saw CL give those drugs to Kouri, correct? Acquaintance 3 never saw that?
Acquaintance 3 didn't tell us that he ever saw that, no.
Okay. In fact, there's no independent witness to corroborate that CL gave Ms. Kouri those drugs, correct?
No eyewitnesses that we have identified, but the investigation is ongoing.
And CL is currently out of custody, right?
Depends on your definition of custody, but she's not incarcerated, no.
Not incarcerated, just on, I think, ankle monitor and not to leave the county, right?
Correct.
But following your interviews with her, she was released from jail.
Not immediately, no. She worked with the prosecutor in the other county where her drug court is and came to a resolution as to those charges against her. And part of that was being released on ankle monitor.
Okay, so in exchange for the testimony, or not testimony, in exchange for the information that she provided to you, and a deal was worked out where she was placed, essentially released from jail on the order to show cause, correct?
I don't know the specifics of what went on between the prosecutor and CL.
Okay.
But subsequent to our interviews, we reached out to the prosecutor's office and let them know that she was being cooperative. After that, I was not involved in any decisions regarding her release.
Okay, because that's up to the judge and whatnot. But you did communicate that to prosecutors?
Yes.
That she gave you the information you needed?
That she was being cooperative with our investigation, yes.
All right, I want to turn now to your interview, and I'm going to use initial for you. You had an interview with one of Eric's friends. His initials are JS. Do you recall that?
Yes.
That interview occurred about April 20th. Is that correct?
That seems right. I don't know a specific date, but...
Okay. And during that interview, he discussed or you discussed with him that he and another individual were essentially Eric's best friends, correct?
Ms. Lazaro, my apologies.
Yes.
April 20th of which year?
2023. I apologize.
Thank you.
At any point during that interview, did JS mention that Eric had said that at any point during Kouri's marriage, he was concerned that Kouri was attempting to poison him?
I don't recall, but I don't think so.
In fact, you present him essentially 3 scenarios of what could have happened to Eric. That he potentially did it to himself, knowingly, that someone else did it to him, or that it was accidental, right? And you specifically ask him if he thinks Kouri would have done it, and he says, no, in my gut, I don't believe so, correct?
I don't know if that was a direct quote, but yes, he said that he didn't believe that she would have done it.
And he also states during that interview that at the time of his death, Eric and Kouri's marriage was in a really good place.
Yes.
Correct? Now, he also details or talks about a falling out that he and Eric had over the course of their friendship, correct?
Yes, that sounds familiar.
And that Eric and his other friend that he refers to in this interview actually had a falling out right before Eric passed away, correct?
Yes.
You also he talks about the fact that, all 3 of them at different times had marital problems that they had helped each other through, correct?
JS told me that he and Eric and their other friend would confide in each other about their marriages and would share information, and that was how he had the insight that he had into Eric's life.
Okay. He also talks about that Eric changed or created these trust documents, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And his understanding, based on what he said that Eric told him, was because Eric was pissed or upset about the relationship that Kouri had, correct? Or he thought she had.
I don't remember the specifics of that part of the interview, but I do remember that JS was aware that Eric had made the trust.
And he doesn't specifically say anywhere in that interview that the trust was made because he was mad about this home equity loan, correct?
JS expressed to us that he understood that the reason that Eric created the trust was to ensure his son's well-being if anything were to happen to him.
And he also expresses to you that because you asked him why it wasn't changed back, or because the sister was made the trustee, correct? And
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
so in those trust documents, sorry, that was a terrible question. In those trust documents, the sister was made the trustee, correct?
From what I understand, yes.
And you asked JS specifically, or somewhere along the lines of, if they were doing so well, why would he have not changed that back?
Yes.
Okay. And he tells you that it was his way of ensuring that even if they were doing well at the time, if there was a divorce, he would get the last word in it, right?
I remember him using that phrase, getting the last word, yes.
All right. Now, you also testified today about this hunt that took place down in Mexico, right? Correct. And this hunt was February of 2022, correct?
I don't know specific dates, but I'm aware that Eric was on a hunt in Mexico shortly before his death.
And JS tells you that he was really upset, actually, leading in the days right before he passed away about what had happened with this hunt, right?
Yes.
And he was upset that they had paid an outfitter for a number of permits that they believed the outfitter had procured, correct?
Yes, from what I'm recalling, he was upset about the outfitter or the guide had not gotten enough permits for the amount of animals that they ended up taking, and it caused some concerns over legal requirements of tagging animals.
Okay. And getting the cape or anything else, correct?
Correct.
And this is is this outfitter the person that you investigated or that you interviewed?
Someone associated with that hunt and that outfit, yes. I'm not sure the exact association, but a contact for that outfitter.
Okay. So that outfitter was aware that they had made some serious problems for Eric with regard to how many animals they took in Mexico, correct?
According to JS, yes.
And in your subsequent investigation, you know that Eric had some heated conversations actually the night before he passed, or the night that he passed away, with that outfitter, correct?
We received information about that, yeah.
In fact, he was searching how far it was to drive from Scottsdale down there, correct?
Correct. Well, his phone showed that search.
Okay. And JS also told you that he had information or believed that this outfitter was somehow connected to the cartel, correct?
I don't recall. That sounds familiar, but I don't recall if those were the words that he used.
But essentially, he was...
JS made a statement about the cartel when he was talking about Eric and that, yes.
Detective, just a couple more points I want to ask some questions on. There was some discussion during your testimony elicited by the state about CPR given when the night that Eric passed away, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you've reviewed the case file. Eric's body was found on a sheet on the floor at the foot of the bed, correct?
Correct.
And that was because when Kouri was on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, she was directed to remove him from the bed onto the floor by using the sheet, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then 911 dispatcher told her to attempt to conduct CPR, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know if Kouri's certified in CPR?
I do not.
Okay. And for someone in your training experience, if someone doesn't know how to do CPR, it's entirely possible that although they may try, it may not be effective, correct?
Sure.
You also talked about what you refer to as bug-out bags, correct?
Correct.
I'm not from Utah, but given the amount of time I've been here, it's somewhat customary for people to prepare for things here, correct?
From my experience, yes.
Okay. So that would include like food storage, perhaps packing a bag, correct?
Yes.
And one of those bags was Eric's, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall a label with a date on that bag?
I don't recall a date, but I do recall from photographs seeing it labeled as Eric's, yes.
And did you said that there was identification documents in there, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware that those are now expired?
No.
You came onto this case or when did you come onto this case?
In April of this year.
Okay. And you took over as lead detective?
Yes.
And you, at some point after that, went to Kouri's home, correct?
Correct.
And introduced yourself and asked her, do you remember me? You coached my son, correct?
Correct.
And who was the other detective with you?
Sergeant Hoffmeyer.
And Sergeant Hoffmeyer said, hey, I know your best friend. She coached my son, correct?
I believe so.
And presumably, because you are the lead detective, you knew she was represented at that time, correct?
I was not aware of that.
Okay, so you had reviewed the entire case file and did not know she had a lawyer.
I had not reviewed the entire case file at the time that I approached Ms. Richins. I went to the house to introduce myself as the new detective so that she would know what was going on with the case.
Okay. Do you have any conversations with the district attorney's office prior to you talking to her?
I do not think so.
Okay. Were you aware of a letter in the file that I had sent to Detective Woody and specifically your office addressed to the Summit County Sheriff, Mr. Martinez, that I was counsel in the case?
I was not aware of that letter at the time.
And you discussed with Kouri the case, correct?
After she invited us in, yes.
Did you ever ask her if she'd like a lawyer present?
Yes, at one point her mother came to the house and made a point of should she be talking to us, and I said, if you would like to have your attorney here, I'm fine with that.
Okay, but this was after you'd been talking to her, right? Mm-hmm. Are you aware of a conversation between Sergeant Hoffmeyer and Kouri where she asks why Detective Woody was removed from the case and he tells her for mishandling evidence?
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. Did he ever make mention of that?
On that date at that time, no, I don't believe so.
Okay. Was Detective Woody removed from the case?
She wasn't removed from the case. She changed divisions and could no longer fulfill those duties.
Okay. What is she doing now?
She's in patrol.
Traffic.
No, patrol.
Patrol.
Yes.
As in, like a
responding to emergency calls, yeah.
Okay.
She's also part of the K-9 unit.
So she went from being the lead detective in a murder investigation, potentially, to patrol, correct?
Yes, that's common for that to happen in our office.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Bloodworth, anything further?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Within the scope of cross, please.
Detective, on cross-examination, Ms. Lazaro asked you about Ms. Richins' narrative from that night that she gave her husband a drink. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And she asked you about whether or not the police recovered a glass, a cup, a mug, some kind of container for that drink that evening. Remember that?
Yes.
Were there any glasses or containers near the defendant that evening?
On the evening of the death, is that what you're referring to?
Correct. I guess it's the morning of the 4th when police arrived.
Right. I'm unsure without being there on scene, but from reviewing the body cam, I didn't see any.
Am I right that the only information that indeed Ms. Richins, Kouri Richins, the defendant, gave her husband Eric Richins a drink was the defendant's own words, right?
Yes.
Ms. Lazaro had asked you about gaps in timeframes in cell phones. Based on the carrier records, what have you been able to determine about gaps, particularly from early January until shortly after the defendant's death?
We were able to determine from looking at the phone that it appeared that data from several different apps in the phone was missing in that time frame between January and just shortly after Eric's death.
Let me turn now back to CL. On the very first time you met with CL, you testified that you kind of laid out kind of the predicament she was in, facing serious charges, but having potentially valuable information regarding a very serious death investigation, right?
Correct.
After that first meeting, how long until you began questioning her about the drug purchases?
For 4 or 5 days.
So you laid everything out for her on the first meeting and then gave her 4 or 5 days to consider whether she wanted to cooperate and then interviewed her substantively?
Correct.
Let me talk about that interview process. About how long after Eric Richins' death are you now interviewing CL?
Over a year.
And
Here in a couple months.
in order to jog her memory, what, if anything, did you show her?
We showed her the contents of her phone that we seized from her home. We showed her applications, Google Maps, Google Earth. We showed her other witnesses' phones or screenshots of those phones.
And the other witnesses' phones or screenshots of those phones, you showed her screenshots of communications between her and that other witness?
Correct.
With the idea that those communications might jog her memory?
Correct.
Is that kind of iterative approach of showing an interviewee information, is that common when you're interviewing somebody a year after the event, which you're asking them to recall?
Yes. From my experience, people have a difficulty recalling information, especially specific dates from that long ago.
Let me turn now to the April 13th, 2023 date when you introduced yourself to Ms. Richins, the defendant. What's the first thing the defendant did when you introduced yourself?
She invited us into the home.
And about how long did she talk?
3 hours.
She give any indication that she was very excited to talk to you and surprised you taken so long to come talk to her?
Yeah, she made multiple statements that she was glad the investigators were there to talk to her because she felt that she hadn't been in contact with the sheriff's office very frequently before that day.
And did there come one or even several times towards the end of the interview when you said your goodbyes, tried to leave, and she continued to talk?
Yes.
Subsequent to the interview, after you and Sergeant Hoffmeyer left, did she email Sergeant Hoffmeyer with some follow-up?
Yes, she sent an email with follow-up information to both I and Sergeant Hoffmeyer.
Your Honor, I'm going to mark, if agreeable, as Exhibit 1, a transcript of that April 13, 2023 interview.
Ms. Lazaro, have you seen it?
No.
You got to show it to Ms. Lazaro first.
Your Honor, counsel has the audio. I did the audio.
Is that correct?
I believe so. There's a lot there. I hope,
Okay.
but
All right.
we can proceed for today's purposes.
And for purposes of today's hearing, the state would like to move this evidence as Exhibit 1. The state asks that the court file a private at this point. We weren't sure this was going to come up today. We may need to redact some things from it.
Yeah, we're not going to put it in the docket at all, but it can be admitted for States 1 for the purposes of today's detention hearing.
Thank you. Detective O'Driscoll, you recall Ms. Lazaro asked you some questions about interviewing somebody with the initials JS, correct?
Correct.
And you said you interviewed JS approximately April the 20th, 2023, right?
Correct.
And at that point, how long had you been the lead detective on the investigation?
Less than 2 weeks.
And you told, I think you testified, you told Jay something like you thought there were 3 alternatives here. One was an accidental death, an accidental overdose, suicide, or homicide. Is that right?
Correct.
At that point in your investigation, were you looking into and investigating all 3 of those alternatives?
Yes. At that time, I had little information about the case other than the couple of interviews that I had conducted, and I was trying to keep an open mind to all the possibilities.
Thank you. No further questions.
Anything further, Ms. Lazaro?
No.
You can step down, sir. Thank